supply chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. We have a really fun show for you today, and we've got a lot to talk about. John from Streetleaf is going to be here as my guest, but first, I cannot kick off Thoughts and Coffee without saying Happy Canada Day to all the Canadians in our audience. I am wearing my Canada shirt today, but you can't really see it. Anyways, enough about that. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain Blended Podcast and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And we can't do this show without our show sponsor, which is the Secret Society of Supply Chain. It is our supply chain membership group. Head over to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com and secure your spot today. It's our free membership group, but then we also have Women in Supply Chain memberships. We also have the Supply Chain Marketing Masters program in conjunction with Supply Chain Brain as well. So head over there, get all the details. I hope to see you in the community. And I want to give a shout out to all of our newest members. So our newest Secret Society of Supply Chain members, Bobby, Stephen, and John, who is actually joining us today. And for our Woman in Supply Chain connections, we've got Kieran, Candace, and Risha. So welcome to the community. Thank you so much for joining us. Now let's get into what is happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain. Now, I don't know if you know this, but we have recently launched and kicked off our expert network. So this is where we are going to be sharing some breaking news segments, and we want you to be a guest on that segment. So head over to the link in the comments and fill out the form. We will be in touch with you. We want to know what topics you want to be talking about. And we will get in touch when that topic comes up, and we'll reach out to you, and you could be a part of our breaking news segment that is coming up throughout the year. So head over there. We get a lot of inquiries about how to get on the show. This is one way to do that. So head over there, fill out the form, and we will feature you on the show. All right, we've got a couple of brand new episodes. That's right. Right now, we are releasing 2 episodes a week, and we just released an episode with Evans Transportation. It's episode 476. We recorded it on site at Home Delivery World, which was a lot of fun. And let me tell you, his shoe game is on point. I think we have a picture somewhere on our social of both of our kicks that we were wearing that day. And I think we both matched our suit jackets or something like that. It was fun. But go and listen to this episode. We're talking about customized logistics solutions to keep you moving with Evans Transportation. It was a great episode, finding out more about who they are, what they do, and how they can help you. Then episode 477. Now this is an episode you also want to check out. Dara from Warner Transportation joined me. And as you can see here with the title, 95% of cybersecurity breaches start with email. There are some shocking stats in this particular episode, and Dara is the guy to walk us through it all. He is the CTO over at Warner, and there was a lot of really great insights and nuggets that were shared in this episode. So go check both of those out wherever you listen and watch the show, over on the Let's Talk Supply Chain YouTube, but then also we have Spotify and Apple. Next, what are you doing July 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern? Well, I hope you are joining us for the LinkedIn Live. We're going to be talking about unifying your fleet and how to streamline operations, cut costs, and deliver on time with Trace, the co-founder and owner of TSG Fleets. If you want to attend, even if you can't attend live, click the attend button. We will make sure to send you that recording once we are done with that. Sorry. Into this. There we go. All right. The other thing that we've got, I just released a new monthly pop, which is my monthly newsletter over on LinkedIn. This one, I'm talking about my silent battle, my lipedema journey. I did talk about this in a post last week, and I had somebody reach out and let me know that they think that they have it too. They didn't know that they had it before I was able to post about it. So it's making a difference. If you know anybody that could potentially have it, share it. Please, let's get the word out. This is not something that anybody should have to go through alone. So highly recommend you go check that out and read about my journey. We also have a brand new Woman in Supply Chain blog with Danielle. She talks about advocacy, meaningful growth, and falling into supply chain. So go check that out. She's the VP over at LoadSmart. It's a great journey, a great story, and I highly recommend going to check that out. And last but not least, we are hosting the first ever Pickleball Slam at IANA Expo 2025, September 15th. And we can't wait. We've got a few more spots available for sponsorship. And we want you, if you're going to be at IANA Expo, make sure to sign up your teams. This is going to be a great afternoon. They say more business is being done on the pickleball courts than on the golf course. So you're definitely going to want to be there. Make sure to reach out to us. We also have the link to the event so you can sign up in the comments as well. All right. Wow, that was a long one. I usually don't take that long, and John has been very patient waiting for me to bring him up on the stage. Before I do that, remember, we want to know where you're tuning in from, so put it in the comments. We want to know that, and if you like the conversation, we want to see some fire emojis throughout the show. All right, John, it's your turn. How you doing?
Good morning. How you doing today?
Good. So many things to talk about. I actually didn't realize that we had so many things to go through, but we got through it. And we've got all the links in the comments, so super excited for that. Now, for anybody who doesn't know you, John, tell us who you are, what you do, and maybe a little bit about Streetleaf, although we're going to learn a little bit more later on.
Yes. Yeah, my name is John Hantzis. I'm the Director of Operations for Streetleaf. Streetleaf is a solar street lighting company where we're trying to become an intersection of necessity with innovation. So we're thinking about sustainability, smart lighting. We can go over that more. On top of that, I'm also the transportation sector chief for InfraGuard, which is a joint task force with the FBI and private businesses in regarding security within the supply chain sector itself.
That is so cool. You and I have had a few conversations about that, and your story and your journey into that and some of the things that you get into are pretty cool. So we might have to have you back one day to talk about that. We are not talking about that today, unfortunately, but you can always reach out to John to talk about that. I'm super excited to have you on the show because we're going to be talking about tariff engineering. You guys are importing products and things like that as well, but you've also been in the industry. So I think you might have some stories for us. And then workplace culture. This is another conversation that you and I have had, and I thought it was fitting for our conversation today. But before we get to that, let's get to the poll of the week. So we ask everybody a question every single Wednesday morning across our Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn. And this one was interesting. Sometimes they're supply chain related, sometimes they're office related. I mean, we can't be talking about supply chain all the time. So the question we asked everybody, what's your ideal office snack? And we had about 266 votes. There's one day left. If you did not vote on this and you want your voice to be heard, go and check it out. So 40% of you said healthy, fruit and nuts. 29% said just coffee. I think Audrey might have picked that one. And then we had a tie, 15% each, one for sweet and one for savory. John, what did you pick?
Oh, I picked one, but I did say all of the above because I'm technically in between all of those because it depends on what time of the day. As I'm sitting here, I'm sitting across from, snacks behind me here, coffee maker, things of that nature. But we have all those kind of snacks. So a lot of times it depends on the time of day. Just coffee is definitely mandatory throughout the day.
Well, I have to say, I was over at the One Rail offices just a few weeks ago, and they have a fabulous setup for all of their team members and all that kind of. There's a candy corner. There's I got sparkling water out of one of the things. Like they just have everything made for everybody in that kitchen. I thought it was awesome. I mean, what a great way to bring culture together. I mean, everybody has to eat, right? Everybody snacks, right?
Yeah, you have to fuel the innovation.
You do have to fuel the innovation. I love that. I want to get to some of the comments, actually. Steven said protein shake. John, you did answer that one. Audrey said, with the stress of tariffs, I've been snacking, and I do not discriminate. That is so funny. So she also said all of the above. Halia said granolas. Charles said always coffee. And Grant said protein. I mean, I will go with Grant on that one because I do walk with a whole stash of chomps. I like the chomps, right? The little jerky stick or whatever. Because they're protein, they're good. And Nicole, right now on the show, says, I have an awful sweet tooth. Gonna go with chocolates. Myself too, love some chocolate. I actually eat those sunflower buttercups from Trader Joe's, but more at night, less than during the day. But anyway,
we have a drawer full of those nice, healthy snacks, and then it's like coffee espresso on the other side. So it's like diesel coffee. Here we go.
You got to have the coffee. All right. Now is the time of the show that we do talk about a little bit of a market update. I mean, John, you're talking from people from all different facets of the industry. You're talking to leaders, you're talking to professionals, you're talking to team members. What are you hearing? What are people talking about? What's kind of top of mind?
I think right now everyone's more nervous about what I call supplier diversification. So with the current landscape, it's, do we go here? Do we go there? Can we use this one? Can we go to this country? And a lot of times, yes, you can. But one of the big things I caution them on is, depending on the component or whatever it is that you're selling, the higher the value of the component, you also have more complex levels of approval and authentication that you need to do to validate that before you can release it. So it's not just a simple of, I'll just jump over here and start shipping from this country. Well, right. You internally have to validate all of that. And I think that's one of the biggest things to caution against is, yes, you can have a team over here doing supplier diversification, but you also have to be cognizant of the company as a whole, of a validation approval, depending on what product you're putting into the, out into the market.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And we're going to be talking about that with the first article, because we are talking about tariff engineering. And I think it's really going to change some folks' minds as to at what point in the product life cycle, right? And we're really talking about like start to finish. Do we start thinking about tariffs? Do we start thinking about how is that going to affect our end pricing, right? Our bottom line. And it's interesting because some of the companies are thinking about it way before everybody else. And this is the type of scenario that you need to start thinking about it earlier on.
Yes.
Right?
And I think one of the biggest things is where you're at in that adoption scale of and looking at those. So it's something definitely that needs to be prevalent, but also making sure that the teams are completely involved with that. So you can't just have a procurement team making that decision. You have to have kind of the circular supply chain and looking at that, because it's going to affect every department.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to say hi to Stephanie over on my personal LinkedIn. Good morning from Minneapolis. And she says definitely coffee if we go back to that poll and what keeps everybody going during the day. All right, let's get to our first article. So we talked about how we were going to talk about tariff engineering. Now, I don't know about you. You've probably heard this term before, but I'll tell you, I had never heard this term until I read this particular article. And it's kind of embarrassing because the term goes back to 1882, apparently, which, is a long time. And it actually has something to do with importing sugar versus molasses and the duties that were on, I think, sugar over molasses. I didn't know. I didn't get into all of that. But basically, tariff engineering is really trying to figure out how to import your product with lower duties. And some of that could mean changing materials, dimensions, composition, but you have to justify the reclassification of your particular product. And just so everybody's aware, there are 5,000 product classifications that customs brokers and really importers are responsible to go through and make sure they're classifying their product correctly, or there could be a lot of money on the table as far as penalties. What did you think of this particular article, John?
I think it's spot on. I think one of the biggest things that it didn't touch upon, but it sort of did, was you have to be cognizant of your total landed costs. So as you're looking at that supplier diversification, or you're looking at changing the tariff, a lot of companies, if you have one item, but it's made by multiple vendors in different countries, you can't use the same HTS code. And we've all seen it. I'm sure that's what Audrey's comment was about this, because you have a lot of that where you have to be cognizant of your total landed cost, because that's the biggest impact to your organization is what is the final result. So you may be able to switch to a certain country that your per unit cost is lower, but now your tariffs are slightly lower. But now what they fail to understand is your shipping costs are now double and your lead time from that country is double. So a lot of times you may have a procurement team going, hey, we found this supplier. Great. Well, if you have that supplier, but you're not realizing that you go from an 18-week lead time to a 50-week lead time, that impacts the organization. So it's something to be very cognizant of in involving all of your departments. And a lot of times, when you talk about the tariffs, it goes back a long ways. But one of the biggest changes was about in '94 when they did the Modernization Act. And that's kind of where things changed, where they pushed a lot of onus back onto the importers, where ignorance is no longer bliss. You have two different terms that they like to use, reasonable care and informed compliance. So you can't pretend that you didn't know, but at the same time, you also can look at tariff engineering as a strategic plan for any company, because it's not like you're, a lot of times people think, oh, you're just trying to, game the system. No, you have strategic plans where you can use that to navigate to help your company be successful and also economically win in that sense. Where as long as you can reasonably explain how you got to that point is a win, because nobody wants, at the end of the day, CBP has a form called Form 28, which is basically they want additional information. So especially if you're a new shipper and you're bringing something in from another country, you might get one of those to explain a little bit further. And what you want to avoid is the CBP Form 29, which is an action. So a lot of times you want to make sure you're doing everything you can, but be able to explain it. If you go across a CBP officer and say, hey, this is how we came about that HTS code. We looked at this, we saw this, we used this different component, and you can reasonably explain it. They may say, okay, yes, we understand you came to that point, but we feel it's over here. Okay, it's a change, but it's not a negative action against you because you could reasonably explain. If you kind of just said, hey, I'm going to blindly take this HTS code and I'm going to throw that on my commercial invoice, you're going to have a problem. But if you look at tariff engineering as a strategic portion of your company, that can be a very big difference in today's economy, and especially how the products are doing that, where you're looking at for free trade zones. You can try to utilize those. You can look at a lot of those things where you can have your company spending less money up front by utilizing an FTZ. You can also look at different things where percent composition ruling with tariffs, where if you're bringing it in as a raw material and then you're kitting it and doing all the final assembly somewhere else, like those can also change how you do that. I loved one of the portions when they talked about that Snuggie blanket, because here's a company that reduced their tariffs by half because they had it classified as a blanket versus an article of clothing. So it's not like they were gaming the system. It was, hey, we viewed this as this and we felt that way and we were able to negotiate that. So you're looking at it where, people need to stop looking at that, because CBP, they're a great group of people. They're trying to do their job. They're trying to get the bad offenders, not necessarily looking to target people to say, oh, we want to go get some additional money here. So I think a lot of it is that working relationship. And that's where like your customs broker, whoever you're using, is going to be key in validating the data that you're doing, into these programs.
Yeah, but just like for everybody, the importer is still responsible and the customs broker won't pay that penalty if you get a penalty. So the importer is still responsible. But I like what you talked about in some of the examples. So I want to share some of the examples from that article. Highly recommend you go and check it out. There's some really good stuff in there. It's in the comments. If you're over on my personal, we will be putting that in after the show. But some examples, there was a hoodie company that moved everything to all cotton and they saved 15% in duties. Cubic zirconia, some sort of like festive design, was now classified as jewelry instead of a festive design. And that was the difference between a bit of duties as well. Colombia actually starts thinking about tariffs in their design phase. So that's when you're thinking about raw materials, and that's where you're thinking about putting products together and where you're going to manufacture and where that final product is going to come out of. That's what Colombia is doing. They're starting at the design process, which not a lot of people think about or do. And then Converse puts some like felt or something on the bottom of the shoes and they can classify them as slippers. I'm not sure about that one. I mean, that's some pretty good engineering. And, I love that for them. But just be careful. All right, let's get to our next article. So this article is about how they're breaking down the infinite workday. Now, the stats in here are staggering. And I don't know if enough of us really take stock of what happens on a daily basis when we check emails, et cetera, how many emails we get. Highly recommend you go and check out this report. This report talks about how most people, 40%, are starting their day at 6 a.m. and they're already reviewing their emails. Wah, wah. By 8 a.m., they are getting 153 Teams messages, which is crazy. By 11 a.m., messages surge, and by 12 a.m., people are scrambling to catch up between meetings. And meetings are 16% up at 8 p.m. and at 10 p.m., 29% of us are back in our inbox. Woo! And this, I think, might actually be low for supply chain professionals. John, what do you think about this?
It's definitely on the low side. I look at mine and I look at that, like I had to turn off my notifications because it sounded like a phone ringing, before that. And I think, and a lot of it plays to that, where I think, especially as your company, depending on the size of your organization, is you may have your operations team on the East Coast, but your procurement team's West Coast, or you may have another part of your team international. And so because of the time zone difference, you're essentially always on. And I think that happens into a lot of it. And that's kind of where I always look at it, or the way I look at it is, it's very easy for your calendar to be full, but your impact to be empty. And a lot of that plays into this, where you're very busy, you're very doing, but what did you accomplish that day? Is that meeting really going to accomplish something, or could it be an email? And a lot of times you have that question, but if it's a necessity, then you take that meeting. And that's kind of where I think those time frames outside of normal hours come into play, because that's your uninterrupted time, because I call them time sappers. I know my day is going to get robbed 30-40% every day of what I call time sappers, something I didn't plan for, but somebody needs some help or assistance or has a question, and I'm going to dedicate some time to that. So I know that. So I build that into my schedule. I build buffers in between meetings so that, a meeting's going to run over. It happens to all of us, so you build that 10 or 15 minute buffer in between a meeting. But I think a lot of it is, this is where it leads into technology being able to help you. And leveraging that, where you can use certain AI to help eliminate those time sappers for you. The question now becomes, for most organizations, is a security aspect. Is it secure? Can I utilize this one? And I think a lot of times, if you use like a Microsoft Copilot or Loop, those are covered under your Microsoft license. So that's only to be company specific. So you're not using like a Chat GPT or something, because that stuff lives permanently in the ethos once you put it out there. But you can utilize technology available to you to help eliminate or prioritize, those time sappers that you get in your day. And I think I moved away from where, a lot of times people say, oh, artificial intelligence. I think we're beyond that point. I call it augmented intelligence, because most of what we're doing is the data's been there. So you're able to utilize that data set, as long as the data is accurate, which is most people will talk about, is that data set that you're using as the foundation for your AI has to be accurate. And if it is, then you're good to go. If it's not, it's just going to lead to complexity loopholes, where you're kind of just going down this rabbit hole, but really not able to accomplish anything.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And one of the things that they talk about in this article is a new term for, I guess, the leader is agent boss, because they use AI agents to supercharge their work, which is what you're talking about. But they also use it so that they can focus on 20% of the work that delivers 80% of the results. So there is that 80-20 rule. If you are in sales, you've probably heard that many, many, many times. But it's sort of that lesson, right? What is the 20% that we can focus on that gives us the 80% of results? Highly recommend you go and check this out. Even if you're a professional, a leader, go and check out some of these stats, because you'll really, I think it's going to be a little bit eye-opening of how much time people are spending after hours and on weekends, and how do we empower our teams to really embrace augmented technology to help us get over that and supercharge our work. Anyways, now it's time to get to our last article. It's not really an article, it's actually your website.
Yeah.
And I want you to talk a little bit about Streetleaf because we promised that we would. And really, what we want to talk about is around your commitment to sustainability, what that looks like, what you hope to see, and how people are talking about it. You mentioned it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. So talk to us about this. Let's shine a light on some sustainability and what we can do using solar.
Yes, I think one of the biggest things is we're trying to be where we, you see it on there, is we're at the intersection of, necessity and innovation. Can we create smart lighting? Because a lot of times people just take their street lighting for granted. So what we're trying to do is light up people's lives in a smart, cost-effective, environmentally friendly way. And in doing that, you're able to have a bigger impact because, if you look at a street light, one of the examples I had that really set out for me in the beginning was about a couple months in, we had the hurricanes last season. And we go out and do storm checks, make sure all the lights are good. And I was driving through a community, all their power had been off for 2-3 days, and people had lawn chairs around one of our lights because it was the only light that they had. So
Wow.
all these moms and their kids were outside underneath the light because it was the only thing on for them. And then at that moment, you kind of realize the impact your company's really having on people, because these are designed to take category 4 or 5 direct hits. These are, so the sustainability that is there, where, the technology and sustainability can go hand in hand. You can create newer things where sustainability, a lot of times people get scared. They think solar, they immediately think of the roof panels, and it's not necessarily that. We're really just trying to light up people's lives in a positive way, and in a cost-effective way. One of the biggest things is just your standard savings. You're not having to trench conduit. You're not having to do this. We can basically just go dig a hole and be set up and running in 15-20 minutes.
Well, and I think about the different uses of that, right? I think about warehouses, and I think about how organizations are trying to turn or using their warehouse as an example to bring in solar. But then I also think about truck parking. And I think about the parking lots of some of these buildings and these organizations. And I think this would actually really help on the outside. Too many times we talk about the inside of the warehouse. I think this would really help on the outside.
And it's one of the conversations that comes up a lot when I'm speaking at events, is a lot of times people are like, hey, we're not talking about residential. And I think that's kind of, we have that Shine on Florida initiative that we're doing, where we're trying to bring in organizations to talk about that, because a lot of times, I came from a very large, Amazon, you're running a parking lot that by third shift, you don't need 2/3 of that parking lot. Now, if you had a smart lighting, unless they were on a breaker, you would have to turn them off. Now you can say, hey, listen, we'll put those at 30-40% capacity. They have a sensor underneath them. So if the light was off and somebody walked underneath it, it's going to come on full brightness, and then it's going to go off once you pass it. So there's smart technology, and to be able to use those in a warehouse setting, truck stops, something that you don't have to trench all this conduit and have this expensive cost to be able to pull that off. It's like, hey, just put X marks the spot. We drill a 2-foot diameter hole 6 feet deep. That's it. As long as there's no electrical underneath it, we're good to go, and we can be set up in minutes. I think that application is kind of underutilized right now in the warehouse trucking environment, larger companies, street, parking lots, things of that nature. So I think that's one of the big areas that's is an untapped potential right now.
Well, it absolutely is, because I had CargoWise Landside on a LinkedIn Live last week. If you guys missed it, go and check it out. It's on our YouTube. But we talked about the $35 billion theft that's happening right now with trucks and truck parking and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that they talked about was the lighting in the facility, right? There was a few more components that they talked about in being able to thwart that, but one of that is the lighting and making sure that there's no dark corners and things like that. But at the same time, I think if you've got the smart technology, you can turn it on, and it'll turn on if somebody is walking in that vicinity, and so and it'll give an alert, and then you know who's actually in your yard at that particular time. And so I think you're right. I think this could be a really good solution to helping with some of that truck.
And a lot of our lights can be connected, so you can actually monitor them remotely. So it's not just like, okay, you have a light in the ground, you're relying on a sensor. We can log in there and be like, okay, we want to put these lights to 40% capacity, where a storm's coming and we're going to put them in storm, say remote. We can also tell them, hey, there's a light not functioning correctly at this exact pole.
Right.
And, depending on how the terms go, we can go out there and maintain it, or we can tell them, hey, this light's having a malfunction. Can you go out there? And we do that a lot when we partner with utility companies.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, I can't believe we're at the end of the show, John. I think we could probably talk for another 30 minutes. So we may have to have you back on a little bit later on in the year. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us today for the show. John, thank you so much for being an amazing guest. And I hope everybody has a great week. I mean, we've got Canada Day today. We've got 4th of July on Friday. I don't think anybody's working but me and you, John. Anyways.